On the day of the Iowa caucuses, the rumpled, tussle-haired Democratic Socialist senator from Vermont is, as political observers like to say, surging. Bernie Sanders, you may remember, lost the 2016 Iowa caucuses to Hillary Clinton by a whisper, 49.6% to her 49.9%. That after trailing her by 3 points in the final Des Moines Register-Bloomberg poll. Today, one Bernie Sanders leads in 4 of the 6 most recent major in Iowa polls, with Joe Biden taking the top spot in the other 2, and leads in all 6 of the most recent major polls in New Hampshire, according to Real Clear Politics. Also, for the first time, Sanders took the top spot in 2 national polls, CNN, SSRS, and NBC Wall Street Journal. Biden, whose campaign has sharply limited his exposure to the media according to a new Time profile, still leads by an average of 6 points in most other major national polls, but Sanders has risen by about 7 percentage points, while Biden has fallen by about 4 since last August. In other words, after almost a year of primary campaigning with various surges and fizzles in which he largely held steady, Sanders is on an upswing as the primaries kick off. This has upset various members of the political establishment. If 2016 gave us the Never Trumpers, 2020 brings the Oh Not Sandersers. Last week, the Washington Post reported that top Democrats are increasingly alarmed that Sanders could very well be the nominee, but fear that even a hint of an organized anti-Sanders movement would risk alienating the Vermont Independent's sometimes belligerent supporters and play into claims that the process is rigged. Last week, The Atlantic's David Frum argued that Bernie can't win, and New York Magazine's Jonathan Chait went even further, pronouncing that running Bernie Sanders against Trump would be an act of insanity. In USA Today, Matt Bennett and Lene Erickson, Executive Vice President and Vice President, respectively at Third Way, asserted that Democrats court doom by backing Bernie Sanders because his ideas are toxic outside blue America. And then, as former Maryland Congressman John Delaney retired his forgotten presidential campaign on Friday, he left with a parting shot at both Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, telling CNN that taking health care away from a lot of people and forcing them on some new government plan is a hard way to win an election. It's all enough to make me wonder, is Sanders going to take this thing? There is, in the anti-Bernie bluster, something of 2016. The wonky hubris, the near-sneering self-assuredness that an outsider candidate couldn't win at a time of social unrest. That year, Chait argued on February liberals should support a Trump nomination because he would almost certainly lose, which was as good an argument as his New Republic cover story of the liberal case for the Iraq War in 2002. On the eve of the 2016 election, Chait asserted Donald Trump is going to lose because he is crazy, which he didn't, and that Trump is not going to win Michigan, which he did. He certainly wasn't alone. Of course, those doubters had their reasons. 538 gave Hillary Clinton a 71% chance of winning, while the New York Times upshot had Trump with a 15% chance of winning. That's not the case today. Many of the indicators point in Sanders' direction, or they're fuzzy enough that hyper-confident proclamations predicting doom, disaster, and insanity seem to be just that. Cherry-picked punditry. Or perhaps there's something else at work. Maybe the panicked Sanders can't win takes are fueled by the deep-seated centrist fear that he definitely can. Chief among the Oh Not Sandersers' concern is that Sanders is a lifelong democratic socialist. A Gallup poll shows that while socialism has become more popular recently, only 43% of Americans believe that socialism would be good for the country, while 51% believe it would be a bad thing. Chait argues that though Republicans call every nominee a socialist, it'll be child's play for them to paint Sanders' programs as radical and dangerous, when he is a self-described socialist. Bennett and Erickson use Sanders' primary losses in 2016 to argue that he couldn't win the general in 2020. Both points may be true, but despite Sanders' proud socialism, he is still America's most popular politician, drawing more individual donors, 1.4 million, than any other candidate in 2019, and the pair leave out that in the more recent New York Times poll, Sanders leads Trump in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. However Americans feel about the theoretical systems of government, it doesn't necessarily translate to how they feel about a well-known individual politician. Not Sandersers argue that he is untested because he's only won in the deep blue state of Vermont. In this case, they cite an old video of Sanders pulling around with the Soviet communists, bad writing from his youth, including a theory that sexual repression causes breast cancer and a musing on female rape fantasies, and the sketchy finances of his wife's stretch as president of Burlington College. Fromm also cites Sanders backing Iran when they took U.S. hostages. Imagine what Trump and his team will do with that, he writes. Of course, the Republicans will attack any candidate for anything. Last cycle, it was the much-tested Hillary Clinton and her emails, and Trump rallies still chant, "Lock her up." Never mind that Ivanka Trump sent hundreds of emails about government business from a personal account. In the 2004 presidential campaign, the upright and near unassailable John Kerry, who received a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and 3 Purple Hearts for his combat duty in the Vietnam War, was attacked for his military service, making a swift boating a political verb. But voters seem to overlook damaging stories for candidates they like. Bill Clinton had numerous charges of sexual harassment and assault, including a credible rape accusation. George W. Bush was a dolt with DUI. The real question to ask is how Sanders would respond to the attacks. Would he fumble and say, challenge a potential voter to push-ups, as Biden did when asked about his son Hunter's overseas business dealings on the campaign trail? By all indications, Sanders would push through it and return to his message of economic populism. When he was asked about Clinton's comment that nobody liked him, he quipped, "On a good day, my wife likes me, so let's clear the air on that one." Sanders' newfound prominence also means that the Republican attack machine hasn't had the chance to build the case against him for years, a la Clinton. That all aside, the not Sandersers argue as if the choice for Sanders or not were a vacuum, as if there were not other candidates in the race. Pete Buttigieg, who trails Sanders by 16.8 percentage points in a national average of polls, has only 2% support from black voters, a key constituency for Democrats, while Amy Klobuchar, who trails Sanders by 19.2 points, has 0% support from black voters. Stop and frisk pioneer Michael Bloomberg, 15.5 points behind Bernie Sanders, has the highest unfavorable ratings with black voters, as well a plutocrat brand that may not inspire young voters in numbers that the Democrats need to win. After her own summer surge, Elizabeth Warren has fallen in the polls after fumbling her Medicare for All plan. And while Biden is the only candidate to lead with black voters and voters overall, he seems to be running his campaign in a general state of cognitive decline and drew only 50 people to an Iowa event right before the caucuses, all of which is to say that if there's a statistical case against Sanders, there's an even stronger one against the Democratic alternatives. It is certainly true that to win a general election, particularly with an electoral college stacked against a Democratic candidate, no nominee can run a Trump-like base-only campaign to victory. Hillary Clinton won 2.9 million more votes than Trump, while Gore won 540,000 more votes than Bush. One electoral model showed that a Democratic candidate could win by 5 million votes and still lose the election. And Chait makes the salient point that leftist candidates haven't won in swing districts. But Sanders himself has, as Jacobin points out, outraised all his competitors in Obama-Trump districts. 81,841 individual donations from 33,185 donors in these flipped counties, about 3 times as many as the other leading candidates. Still, Sanders will have to expand beyond his enthusiastic but narrow base.